And CRM, firstly, stands for customer relationship management, with and that you know extends from the beginning of the player funnel right through to individual or personalized customer relationship management when you're on a VIP level. And the idea of CRM is to communicate in terms of content and timing, in terms of rewards, is to communicate to players as if you were communicating to them on a one-to-one level.
That sector is growing globally. And for us as a city, as a state, we need to really, show a platform where Africa is not left behind.
This wall, we are busy, with the educational content. There are panels. There's a good wealth of knowledge and sharing of experience. You get insight into the different aspects of gambling.
Hello everyone, how are you doing today? My name is Victoria and I'm super excited to welcome you back to another episode of the iGaming Africa podcast. And with me today, I have the exceptional Segabon Shanta, an iGaming consultant based in South Africa. I'm super excited for today's series. This podcast is hosted by iGaming Africa. And on this particular episode, we have Shanta Segabon, and I'm just going to let her introduce herself. Then we'll start discussing exactly the things you need to hear. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you to iGaming Africa for having me. I'm Shanta Segabon, as Victoria said. I represent Game Plan Consulting, which specializes in CRM, and I've been focusing on CRM, particularly in the iGaming industry, for the last 17 years, which has become a big passion of mine.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Can you tell us a bit about, your career transition? You've 17 years is a whole lot. That's, so
Yes,
many years of experience. You must have worked
certainly.
across the board. Can you share a bit of that with us?
Sure. I started my iGaming career 17 years ago in Johannesburg, and then I worked in Johannesburg for 6.5 years before I got the opportunity to move to Europe, still in CRM. And whilst in Europe, I worked for a number of big operators, where I was really able to get the experience um, from all angles, from a technology perspective, working with different teams and cultures, and working with, I think, different tools, and especially on the gamification and engagement side of things within the European market. So that was a great learning curve for me. And then a couple of years ago, came back to South Africa, where I saw this huge need for CRM done better within the South African and especially within the African market as a whole.
Okay, so that's a really really nice career progression. So if you are to define CRM specifically within the gambling context, how would you define it? And also, what's one thing most people don't understand about CRM in gaming?
So I'll start with the definition. And CRM, firstly, stands for customer relationship management, with and that you know extends from the beginning of the player funnel right through to individual or personalized customer relationship management when you're on a VIP level. And the idea of CRM is to communicate in terms of content and timing, in terms of rewards, is to communicate to players as if you were communicating to them on a one-to-one level, right? So if you took let's say two markets at opposite ends of the world, Australia and the US. So if you had US players and Australian or New Zealand players in your database, the idea is to communicate to those two groups of people who may be playing different uh, products. So one group may be playing casino and the other may be sports bettors, right? At different, obviously, times because they're in different time zones, and with communication that is tailored to the language, the value level that these players are on, and the what engages them the best in terms of rewards or your loyalty program. So there's so many complexities to CRM, but in a nutshell, it's all about communicating to a huge base of players as if you were communicating to them one on one. And then I think the other question was, how do we, or what is the biggest misconception about CRM? So the biggest, I think, misconception about CRM is that it's all about email campaigns. It's about mass marketing and not tailoring your content or your communication to where in the world players are, which time zones they play in, the language they speak, or the types of rewards and bonuses that keep them engaged and retained.
Okay. From what you were explaining, defining CRM primarily, even within the gambling industry, you talked about how it's not the popular misconception of, the niche down definitions like email marketing, but instead it covers a broad layer from the player's life cycle to their first interaction, all the flow on how the players can be properly engaged, all can be handled within CRM. If you are to discuss the player's life cycle from the first point of engagement to VIP handling and also locking in the players to continually engage the platform, how would you discuss that on exploring that kind of aspect?
Sure. I mean, firstly, something I learned while working in Europe with European operators is that there was a major shift around 10 years ago, and the a lot of the Swedish companies uh, did player engagement a lot better than the rest of the world, right? So we then started looking at engagement as a precursor to retention. And coming from a company in South Africa, um, we did a lot of buy yet, right? So we would send the player an offer. There was no way of engaging the player. All we said to the offer was, buy this, get that. Okay. And we did not engage the player with any content or gamification or tools. And a lot of the Swedish gaming companies did that much better. And what you did see was is that an increase in engagement will lead to an increase in revenue and player retention, which is the objective. But what that also does is that it it remains top of mind for the player who might be playing at multiple operators, right? So if you engage your players as opposed to having a transactional relationship with them, what that does is it keeps your brand top of mind every time the player thinks about gambling or playing online, because you've treated the player a lot differently than some of the other operators. And that's how you distinguish your business or your brand from the rest of the brands out there, right? By really giving the player that individual experience. And part of that, and while it seems very simple, and it is a really simple methodology, but is so often overlooked, and that's the customer life cycle, right? And what that means is, if we put ourselves in the player's shoes, how do we treat the player from the very onset, from the point of registration up to the player becoming a VIP and whether the players dropped off at multiple points in that relationship and how we've brought the player back. And that's important. And I think it's sometimes overlooked. So if we speak about how we engage the player, new players, as an example, a player comes in, he registers, he might make a first or a second deposit, but how are we treating that player differently to players who have been playing with us for months and even years? And that treatment of new players has to be different, right? If you go into a store and you're a new customer, and it's a high-end luxury store, as an example, you would get treated differently as a new player, or as a new customer rather. So you'd be introduced to the product, and you might get a tour of the store. You might be given information on what the best selling products are within that store, versus an older player who is already familiar with the product. So we need to think about it in that way. As a new player who's signing up to a new brand, how am I engaging this new player differently to a player who has been playing with the brand for a while? And how do I get this new player to become a regularly active player at the brand? And inevitably, how do I get this player to play or deposit as much so that he can become a VIP? And again, that is directly linked to revenue. And sometimes I think the other misconception is that we don't see that intrinsic link between CRM and revenue, right? And there's a link between how well or how poorly we do CRM and your revenue at the end of the day. If we retain more players upfront, more new players, it means we're pushing more players into our retention funnel, right, where they deposit more and they're active more frequently. And ultimately, it means we're pushing more players into your VIP funnel, okay, which is the ideal scenario, right? But I think what happens often is that we don't treat new players differently, and they have a bad experience at the casino or the sports book, and they disappear, right? So we've spent, and there's an acquisition cost for that player who's come in, right? You might have made one or two deposits, which doesn't cover your acquisition costs, and now we've lost him, right? So you can see how that again impacts revenue.
So, from what I've learned, especially when you talk about the flow for the players and the team building, whatever structure they're building around their CIM, it shows that engaging your players should not be transactional in any way, because it's very important to focus on existing players than relying on solely acquiring new players every single time. Because if there are no structures in place, definitely even the cost of acquisition cannot be recovered. And you keep repeating the cycle, which at the end of the day definitely does not benefit the brand in any way. You've
100%.
discussed around how CRM strategies can, enhance loyalty, engagement, and most importantly, profitability, which is the essence of building a
Absolutely.
business and how to make it
Absolutely.
successful. Yeah. Can you discuss, a bit in terms of what poor life cycle management? Because, all these things you've mentioned, it shows that most times the organizations don't put themselves in the client's shoes. And
Right.
can you explain, the amount lost in value? When I say amount, I don't even mean in terms of just money, like in terms of possible impact lost in value due to poor life cycle management, which CRM can adjust.
I think the answer is quite simple, and very short, is that if there is no life cycle, customer life cycle management, and and we're not even speaking about looking at player value and engaging players with offers based on their value. We're talking about a very simple methodology of customer lifecycle management. If that's not done, and if we don't have a good CRM team in place who's passionate and curious, again, we're going to see the operator bleeding money because we're spending, and I've seen potentially, hundreds of thousands of dollars on acquisition costs, and we're not retaining those players. And I think that is the big problem in Africa, is that every operator, most operators in Africa, are so focused on acquisition and driving players into the funnel, but not keeping those players in the funnel or within the retention funnel. And players are not loyal unless you give them a reason to be. So players who are not engaged with, and if there are no attempts to retain players, they'll go on to the next brand and play with that brand. And if they get treated the same way, they'll go on to a third brand. So in a very competitive environment and industry like iGaming, we need to put our best foot forward, and we need to engage players along the customer life cycle so that we retain our players and we get maximum value from these players.
That sounds really interesting. So, aside, let's say, beyond product and the platform itself, what would you say makes a good brand in this space?
I I started out my career at the company now known as Betway, and they've done a really good job of it. I think from the get go, they've always understood the importance of CRM and customer retention, and if not more, then equally important to new player acquisition. So there's always been, and this again comes back to the point about CRM being as important as any other department within the organization. And for a lot of operators, it's an afterthought, right? So let's spend millions of dollars on the acquisition strategy and on getting players into the funnel. But CRM and retention is always an afterthought, right? And sometimes it's too late because you're losing and you're bleeding players who could potentially have been good value players. So CRM and I think Betway and companies in Europe like Unibet and some of the other Swedish brands do a really good job on customer retention. Keep the players active. Their messaging is tailored to where the player is within the customer lifecycle, which is again imperative to how well we retain a player. When you're speaking to a new player, the content that you're sending to that player is very different to a BIP or very different to reactivating an old player, right? We have to think about, again, new players differently to the way we communicate to active players or players who are dropping off of their normal levels of activity. So that's important and sometimes overlooked. But CRM is all about tailoring the messages and the bonuses and rewards to where players are in the customer lifecycle.
That sounds really interesting. Majorly because, when you talked about building a brand, you are talking about how important even the promotion the players come in contact with should vary from players to player. How important relating with them is, the quality of service, getting their trust, and a whole lot of things that basically shift from brand centric approach to a more player centered decision making process. And when you look at African operators, how would you say African operators can shift from this brand centered to player centered decision making process in their operation system?
Number one is hire the right people. And firstly, you need a team or you need a person in place who's going to be the custodian of the player centric methodology, right? And you need someone within the organization to own that and drive that consistently. Because remember, the product department or CS, the other departments will continue and they will all have their own priorities. But it is up to this custodian of CRM to continuously push how integrated or well integrated CRM is in other parts of the business. So when the product team is developing a new feature, or when the CS team is speaking to players, they're driving a unified message, which is coming from CRM. And I find that it's often the problem within the African market, that there's no alignment with the CRM department or with CS or with the product. So everybody's working on their own priorities. And in that way, we also neglect this unified player centric view of players. But again, to reiterate, the first priority for any operator looking to set up the CRM function is to have the right people in place, and to have the right team or the right person in place who's going to drive the importance of CRM throughout the business.
That's really solid response. And you are very experienced. You've worked across board and you've been at this for 17 whole years. That's mind blowing. Can you share with us, a real world example of a time CRM improved performance for a gaming operator you worked with?
I think like some companies would have an issue with that, right? Because operators don't really want other operators knowing what their retention rates are or how many customers they have. So if we can leave the name out of the company, I think that would be good. But I can speak about, yeah. So I can speak about, the what we did to get more players in, or whatever the case was. Yeah, Victoria, I've worked for a US facing brand who was focused on sportsbook. A big driver of their revenue was the NFL. And of course, at the end of the season, you have the big Super Bowl, which is the final. And what we did to increase revenue, we saw quite a good, I think it was between 7 and 10%, is we started opening, or we started allowing players to place early bets, right? Because traditionally what we saw was players would come in at the last minute on a Saturday to place a bet on the NFL final. But what we started doing is taking bets early. So it started, on the Wednesday as opposed to on the Saturday morning. And then we also gave players, so these are majority sportsbook players, we gave them free spins on a casino game during halftime, right? So while they were watching the Super Bowl game, we gave them some free spins. And what that did is it helped us in the long run, because after the Super Bowl, there is no NFL. So there's a downtime, and which is when you would see a lot of your sportsbook players like disappear for a couple of months before the new season starts. But by getting players who would ordinarily play sportsbook, by giving them free spins, what we did see was a good percentage of these players actually came to bet on casino. And as you know, the casino product's always available, right? There's no off season for casino. So these players got used to playing casino or with the free spins. And then after the NFL season finished, they would come in and start betting on casino, which meant that we decrease your rate of players lapsing, and we increase the retention rate of players who would have otherwise disappeared for a couple of months before the new season started.
Wow, that's genius. That's genius. Listening to how the 7 to 10% is definitely a whole lot of numbers. And
Yeah,
also, not just only doing that by increasing the engagement during the NFL period, also being able to bring in the players for subsequent interaction during what would have been a downtime is absolute genius. But considering where the industries are right now, would you say, technology and all of those things coming up, especially with AI changing how things are done across several industries, would you say, would you talk about how AI has changed or has impacted, CRM strategies in general? Or has there been
sure.
no major impact?
There has been, and I think people are always skeptical about using AI. But when people ask me about having been in the industry for 17 years and why I've been in the industry for so long, I always say it's because the industry is very dynamic. And a big part of that is because we have all of this technology available, especially on the CRM side. So you have CRM tools like Optimove or Smartico, gamification tools, which help you keep players engaged. And the technology is always changing and improving, right? As we get to understand player behavior more and more, we have the ability to change the technology that we use. And AI is no different, right? We need to embrace AI, and it will help us with the types of promotions that we run, and it will, even help you with content that you're sending to a particular segment of players, the types of promotions that we run to keep players more engaged. And also it helps us with segmentation and identifying future value of players. So a lot of the CRM tools will have additional or will have add-ons which will allow you to look at risk of churn, right? So it looks at player activity on an individual level, and when Victoria is likely to churn or drop off, we'll send her an offer versus the more traditional way of doing it, which looks at everyone who hasn't been active in the last month, as an example, and we send everyone the same offer. But what AI and intelligent or machine learning teaches us to do is tailor offers and bonuses and rewards based on the player activity. Because you might be playing every weekend, and that's your normal level of activity, and I might be playing every 2 to 3 days, right? So machine learning and AI will help us understand these different behaviors within our database and tailor offers accordingly.
I really, really, really like how much AI, is improving so many aspects, especially when, you've spoken about how important client interaction is and being able to value each client individually. And if AI can definitely amplify the process of retainership, I think it does so much also in the CRM sector. And earlier, you actually mentioned a couple of tools, which I can't rename right now, but for especially for businesses in Africa, what kind of tools do you use and would you recommend?
So there are a number of tools out there, and some of them have been developed for the iGaming industry, um, which are quite cool. And you get tools which go from like very simple tools which will enable you to upload a CSV segment and attach an email and send that out to your players, up to a Rolls Royce level tool, which will do all of the thinking for you. So it really is dependent on your budget, right? Obviously, I would encourage operators to go for a tool which incorporates gamification. And that's how you really set your brand apart from the rest of the operators. And that will include a strategy, which again means that you don't have to engage with your players, and it doesn't have to be about giving big bonuses to everyone all the time. All it will allow you to do is set in place different missions or different, I think, prizes or two or sorry, can I start that again? Okay, so some tools will that do encompass a gamification part that will allow you to set up missions where you can engage your players. And I'll give you a good example. I think this a medical aid scheme in South Africa called Discovery Health. Like they do a good, and that's a good example of a loyalty program, right? A gamification tool out there which I really like is Smartigo, where you can set up missions to encourage players to come in, and it's small things like confirm your email address or confirm your telephone number, and you get points for that. So, and there are two advantages to that. Players will accumulate points, and with the accumulated number of points, you can go on to claim a bigger prize, which might be 100 free spins or big deposit match offer. And at the same time, you're setting up these little missions for players to keep coming and engaging with your brand, right? So it doesn't feel forced. We're on our mobiles for a big part of our lives, and all this allows you to do is to access the app via your mobile and complete these little missions. No different to the way Emirates does their loyalty points rewards. They obviously give you certain missions or milestones to complete so that you're on a specific level, and associated with that level will come certain benefits. And I think that is ultimately like, or that is the ultimate engagement tool, right? To engage players, to
Oh,
get
that
them
sounds
coming
so
in.
detailed.
Yeah. So I recommend Smartico. Optimove is another big one in the industry. They've been around for a while. They understand player behavior within iGaming. There's a new kid on the block called Fast Track. Um, Fast Track does gamification. It does real time communication, which again, if you have the budget for the Rolls Royce of a CRM tool, then you should be going for Fast Track.
Okay, so if I'm correct, you mentioned fast track. I think I remember that one, and a couple other tools. African can look into, and definitely even beyond Africa. And but looking at the CRM practices you've mentioned, and based on your experience and your level of exposure, what practices would you say are still, missing or underutilized in the gambling space? And if you could talk directly to operators right now, what would you advise them to do differently?
Cool. I would, as I've mentioned before, the first thing, biggest priority is get the right people in place who are going to drive the CRM strategy within the business. And they're also going to align that strategy with product and with CS and the other teams within the organization. And I think I have like 5 core principles of CRM. So these are the 5 things that I think every operator should consider as part of their CRM strategy. So it's segmentation, it's things like your promotions, whether it's on the website or not. The other things are your reporting and KPI analysis, which, if you want to know how well your campaigns are doing, then you need to know, you need to tie that in with reporting. Because what you want to steer clear of is just sending out tons of campaigns, but not really knowing how well these campaigns are performing, right? And if you do that, and if you identify the campaigns that aren't performing, you optimize them so they perform better. And that really is, CRM at its very core. Like at its very core in iGaming, what works today may not work tomorrow, or you may do something tomorrow that worked even better than what we did today. So it's constant optimization of the content and the promotions, the bonus strategy as well. Should we be giving the same bonus to everyone in the database? Obviously not. You want to reward your players who are driving the lion's share of your revenue, as opposed to players who just come in, take up the bonuses, and never play their own money. So those are really like my core focus areas within CRM. And I think, and you obviously have to juggle all of these at the same time, right? You can't have a good communication strategy with omni channels, but you're not advertising or marketing the same promotions on the website. That will be a break in the player experience.
That is really, really insightful. Talking about direct communication with these operators, you've spoken about stronger, communication, how they talk, better system, overall things that can genuinely help their brand growth, and the things that are lacking in terms of customer cycle thinking and how to develop all this locally, and most importantly, hiring the right people. Thank you so
Yep.
much, for sharing these things. I know there's definitely some people listening that are not operators, but they love what you do. And being in the same industry for about 17 years, from all the conversations today, even I have learned so much from just listening to you. It shows growth, it shows experience. And if someone is listening to you and they would like to do what you do someday, especially within the gaming industry, what can you share how you go into CRM and what advice you give them, and what has kept you inspired in this space? And also, is the space open to both technical and non-technical talents, and how can they go about training to get better in the industry?
So, Victoria, that's a really good question. I think it's a great career path for people who are passionate and enthusiastic and want to keep uh, pushing the boundaries. I think CRM, and particularly CRM in iGaming, has allowed me to do just that, right? And in 7 different countries. There's no book written on CRM in iGaming. We're constantly pushing boundaries and trying new things and testing all the time. So if you have the curiosity and if you're passionate about customer experience or player experience, then you should definitely be in CRM in the iGaming space. Whether you're technical or non-technical, there's a place for you. Um, and I started out not having any experience in CRM. And 17 years later, here I am, just because I've been passionate about it. And the drivers of the passion, or the drivers of my passion, has been the technology we use in iGaming and the fact that there's no book written on iGaming, or CRM in iGaming, right? There are lots of articles and, um, there are people out there with lots of experience, but it's a space in which you can really grow and put your theories to the test. A large part of what I do with game plan consulting is Skillshare and sharing the knowledge and passing that on to the next generation of young iGaming professionals. People can always get in touch with me. I'm happy to share those skills and that knowledge. And I would really like for people to consider it as a career path because I think there are numerous um, opportunities for people within iGaming.
Oh, that's really amazing because I know definitely there are a whole lot of people, both young and old, listening to this, and would definitely want to be a part of this. And if you are to say one thing to someone looking to build a career, because talking about this, there's a whole lot of passion. It sounds interesting, but every industry has that one thing someone looking to come in new has to keep in mind if they plan to stay as long as you have. I would want you to say, first thing is, what is the starting point? What kind of resources should they look to? Instead of just because, YouTube, there's the tendency to go down the rabbit hole and you
Right.
keep searching for things since there's no certain structure or flow. What would you say in terms of structure if you want to build a career in this space? This is how to go about it. And also, what's going to be your biggest challenge in the industry? What would if you're telling a new person looking to build a career, this is what will be your biggest challenge, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Let's start with the biggest challenge. I think getting buy in from more experienced people will always be challenging. And I think you need to drive that with results. And that's how you prove your worth, particularly in an industry like this, by saying, I've done X, Y, and Z, and this is the results of that. Um, I constantly hear people say, oh, I've run this promotion and I think it did well, or I haven't had a look at the results. And the one thing we can be sure of is by looking at the numbers, right? So you have to have a passion for the numbers. You have to eat, breathe, live the numbers because it's indicative of how well the CRM team is performing. and and I always say that's how I justify my paycheck at the end of the month is by looking at how many players have I brought in or how many players have I retained through my CRM efforts. So that's the challenge, but you overcome the challenge with the numbers and by having the reports and the analysis to show how well your promotions are working. And I think the one thing you need to have is a good mentor and someone who is willing to spend the time with you and really show you the ropes and show you what you're able to achieve with the tool set that you have, right? Not every organization, not every operator out there will have the most sophisticated tool set. But if you have the right mentor who's going to give you that, who's going to give you the knowledge and the skill share that you need, then there's no limit as to what you can do. And I think having a coach or a mentor within the organization is going to push you every day and help you explore, alternate ways of getting players in or getting players to deposit more frequently. So that's helped me tremendously in my career. I've been really fortunate to have great managers and leaders along the way, and it's certainly a big reason as to why I'm still in the industry and why I've still focused on CRM.
Definitely, that's a whole lot of pointer to anyone looking to build a career. So if you're listening to this and you're looking to do exactly what Shanta does, make sure you reach out to her to get any help you need. Um, so looking to wrap this up, and I think one thing I would love to know is what, because every industry has something you're looking for to see things being done differently moving forward. Sometimes it's not just things being done differently, it could be the kind of growth you expect to see. For example, within the blockchain industry, within the gaming industry, we are mostly talking, you hear us talk about adoption, you hear us talk about, regulation, there's more acceptance. So every industry has that when it comes to it. So what shift would you like to see within, the iGaming industry within the next year?
Um, I would like operators and particularly CEOs or heads of department saying, "Well, we've always done it this way." So that's a mind shift or a shift in mindset, right? And often going into a business as a consultant, that's the first challenge. Is that there's nothing wrong with our CRM strategy because we've always done it that way. And in an industry where you can explore alternate ways of doing things, you have to be open to it because the goalposts change. And like you said, regulation changes all the time. You have to be adaptable and you have to want to drive the growth in numbers, right? Whether it's first time depositors or returning customers or VIPs, you have to be passionate about those numbers. And the only way you're going to constantly change that or improve that is by having a mentality which allows you to try different things or test different things all the time. So, certainly for me personally, it's always a challenge. We've always done things this way and it works. The question is, if you did something differently, would it work even better? So, I'd like to see that change in mindset.
I definitely would even adopt that. If you do this differently, would that still work? That should be a question everyone asks when you're trying to innovate, because you have to constantly try new things and see it being done differently. I really hope you definitely see that coming, in the industry within the next year. Personally, for me, it's been super amazing listening to you talk. And I know anyone listening, both from operators angle to just, everyday listener, this has been very educative. But rounding it up, what would you say? Do you have like a final message or something we can call like a takeaway for listeners?
Wow. So, I think firstly, thank you to iGaming Africa and yourself for having me. Um, as you can see, I'm very passionate about CRM, and I think, and this is not a fantasy, but based in reality, every team or every operator out there needs to have a strong CRM strategy, right? And you need someone in the organization to drive that. So I think if there was one piece of advice I'd give to operators out there, you need to ask yourself, are we extracting maximum value from our current players, or how do we get to a point where we are doing that?
That's definitely a really powerful one. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you're an operator out there, you know the questions you should be asking. You need to listen to this section over and over because you deliver so much. And some people listening to this, one of the key things you've spoken about throughout is hiring the right people. Some
Yeah.
people may want to, work with you, learn from you. If someone is looking to collaborate with you one way or another as an operator, where can they find you, or where can reach out to you to work with you directly? And are you even open to working
Sure.
with them directly?
So you're more than welcome to message me on LinkedIn. The LinkedIn page is Game Plan Consulting. So it's three words, Game Plan Consulting. And then my LinkedIn profile is Shanta, that's Shanta, and surname is Segabon, Segabon. If you have a question or an idea or just you want some advice, please reach out. I'm always happy to skill share and share some of that knowledge and experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure a whole lot of people listening to this would definitely be reaching out. Today, we've learned so much around how powerful CRM is in terms of retaining your users, empowering your system, your structure, and helping your business move towards profitability rather than just constantly, following the expenses part on getting new clients. So thank you so much for, joining us today. It's been an amazing session listening to Shanta. I feel like I can write a book on CRM after this podcast. It's been so educative, so informative. And we'll constantly do this at different episodes, bringing professionals to talk to you about gaming scaling your iGaming operator business, and also how to build career within this space. Thank you so much, and we'll definitely see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye, Victoria. Thank you.
Bye, Chantal.